Close your eyes. The year is 1930. You are standing not in a kingdom, but in a desperate, sun-scorched landscape of survival. Around you, endless dunes, scattered tents, and the brittle silence of poverty. The air doesn't shimmer with heat. It hangs with the weight of a failed state. This is the Arabian Peninsula. There is no skyline, no infrastructure, no future. Just a collection of warring tribes, recently and tenuously unified by a warrior king, Abdulaziz ibn Saud. His kingdom's economy is a single fragile thread, the fees paid by Muslim pilgrims journeying to Mecca, and now that thread is snapping. The Great Depression has strangled global travel. The pilgrims have stopped coming. The royal treasury isn't just low, it's empty. The king is so broke, he can't pay his own guards. He is borrowing sacks of rice and bales of cloth just to keep his court alive. He is not a global player. He is a man on the brink of losing everything to the desert from which he came. Now, snap your fingers. It is today. That same patch of sand commands a $2 trillion sovereign wealth fund that owns stakes in everything from Silicon Valley to superheroes. It builds cities in straight lines and ski resorts and dunes for sport. It can, with a single decision, send shockwaves through gasoline prices in Tokyo, Paris, and New York. It holds the global economy not by the hand, but by the throat. How did this happen? The lazy answer is, they found oil, but that is a child's explanation for a heist of epic proportions. Venezuela found oil. Iraq found oil. Look at them. No. Saudi Arabia's story is different. This is not a story of luck. This is a story of a 100-year con, a masterclass in patience, negotiation, and geopolitical cunning, so profound it rewrote the rules of global power. They didn't just find a resource, they executed a slow, deliberate, and brilliant takeover, first from the world's most powerful corporations, and then from the world's most powerful nations. This is the dark, dazzling blueprint of how to actually get rich. Welcome to the masterclass. The Bargain with the Devil, 1930 to 1938, The Anatomy of Desperation. To understand the zenith, you must first sit in the depths of the desperation. The 1930s, for the newborn kingdom of Saudi Arabia, was not an era of building, but of bare-knuckled survival. King Abdulaziz had conquered with the sword, but he could not eat sand. His revenue model was prehistoric and catastrophically vulnerable. The Hajj pilgrimage was a seasonal, fickle stream of coins. When the Great Depression hit, that stream vanished. We have reports of the king's creditors, Indian and Persian merchants in the coastal town of Jeddah, literally closing their shops to avoid his requests for more loans. The state was so insolvent that salaries for soldiers and officials went unpaid for years. This wasn't a recession, it was a collapse of the very idea of a state. In this crucible of need, a visitor arrived, not a diplomat, but a geologist named Carl Twitchell, scouting on behalf of American oil interests. To the cash-rich, arrogant executives of Standard Oil of California, SoCal, this was a frontier, a blank, backward space on the map to be claimed. Their attitude was imperial. They would provide the capital and technology. The locals would get a small fee for the privilege of having their emptiness turned profitable. In 1933, the king, with no other cards to play, signed the concession agreement for the exclusive right to search for oil across 930,000 square kilometers, an area larger than Texas. The company paid 35,000 pounds in gold coins and promised an annual rent and a loan. It was a deal of staggering inequality, but in that moment, the gold was not investment capital, it was life support. It paid down urgent debts and bought a few more months of rain. Then began the agonizing wait. For 5 years, the Americans drilled into the scorching earth. Dammam well number 1, dry. Number 2, dry. Up to well number 6, dust and disappointment. The California Arabian Standard Oil Company, CASOC, was bleeding money into the sand. In San Francisco, the boardrooms echoed with talk of abandonment. The Saudi project was becoming a laughingstock, a wildcat gamble gone cold. Back in Riyadh, the king's doubters whispered he had sold a chunk of the kingdom's soul for nothing. But beneath well number 7, history was waiting. On March 3, 1938, at a depth of 1,440 meters, the drill bit pierced a pressurized chamber so vast it defied imagination. The oil didn't just flow, it exploded to the surface in a black roar, a geyser of raw potential. They had tapped the largest single petroleum reserve on Earth. The lottery ticket was real, and it was infinite. Yet, here is the critical, overlooked truth of this moment. the discovery did not make Saudi Arabia rich. It made the American corporation rich. The agreement granted Saudi Arabia a small royalty per ton, while Kawsak, soon to be renamed Aramco, owned the oil, the infrastructure, the shipping, and the gargantuan profits from selling it on the global market. The kingdom was a passive landlord collecting rent from a tenant who owned the entire city built on the land. The wells, the pipelines, the refinery at Ras Tanura, the expatriate compound in Daharan, all were American sovereign territory within the kingdom. The wealth was extracted, refined, and shipped away. Saudi Arabia had provided the stage, but the Americans were taking home the entire box office. They had saved the monarchy from bankruptcy, but in doing so, they had installed themselves as the true economic governors of the realm. The stage was set, not for partnership, but for a future reckoning. The Salami Slice Takeover, 1950 to 1980. The art of the quiet, hostile takeover. If the discovery was about geology, the next 50 years were about psychology and sheer strategic grit. This is where Saudi Arabia separates itself from every other resource-cursed nation. They looked at the model, a foreign corporation profiting wildly from their land, and realized that brute force nationalism, as Iran had learned, gets you bombed, cooped, and bankrupted. So, they pioneered a different tactic, the incremental, irreversible squeeze. They wouldn't seize the company, they would become the company, one meticulously negotiated slice at a time. The first slice came from an unexpected ally, the US Treasury. In 1950, with the Cold War frost setting in, Saudi Arabia made a quiet threat. The king suggested that perhaps such a lopsided deal might push his impoverished kingdom toward other spheres of influence, a clear nod to the Soviet Union. In Washington, the fear was immediate. The State Department intervened, not to punish Aramco, but to save it. They engineered a revolutionary 50-50 profit-sharing agreement. By exploiting a U.S. tax loophole, Aramco would pay its income taxes not to Washington, but directly to the Saudi government. Overnight, Saudi revenue soared. This was the masterstroke. They used America's own Cold War paranoia to dramatically increase their share of the pie, all while keeping the Americans happily in place to run the machine. Enter the master tactician of this long game, Ahmed Zaki Yamani. Appointed oil minister in 1962, Yamani was the perfect protagonist. Young, fluent in English, educated at Harvard and NYU, he wore tailored suits and spoke in the calm, logical language of Wall Street boardrooms. He disarmed Western negotiators with his elegance, while being utterly uncompromising in his goal, Saudi ownership. Yamani's genius was in understanding leverage. He knew the West's economy was now addicted to cheap Saudi oil. He also knew Saudi Arabia still lacked the technical ability to run the complex Aramco system alone. So, he devised a framework for participation. In 1973, following the seismic shock of the oil embargo, our next chapter, Yamani struck. He announced the Saudi government was taking a 25% stake in Aramco. It wasn't a request, it was a new reality. By 1974, it was 60%. The negotiations were excruciating, a global high-stakes poker game. Yamani would calmly present forecasts, maps, and legal precedents, his quiet force a weapon. Finally, in 1980, the deal was sealed. Saudi Arabia bought out the remaining 40% from its American partners, Exxon, Mobil, Chevron, Texaco, for a final, staggering sum. The takeover was complete. But note this, they paid for it. This was not an expropriation. It was the world's most expensive and polite corporate acquisition. And the final masterstroke? They immediately hired the very American companies they just bought out as technical contractors. The expertise stayed, the ownership, and, crucially, the control departed. With the stroke of a pen, the Arabian-American oil company became Saudi Aramco, a fully state-owned entity. The kingdom was no longer a royalty collector. It was the CEO, the majority shareholder, and the head of global strategy for the most valuable commodity on earth. They had patiently, legally, and ruthlessly taken back their birthright, transforming from a tenant in their own house into the sole owner of the entire estate. 1973, the year the weapon was fired, the geopolitical trigger. By the early 1970s, Saudi Arabia had secured a 25% stake in its own oil, but it was still a partner, not a commander. The world still viewed it through a patronizing lens, a wealthy but backward desert kingdom, a client state of the United States. That perception evaporated in the smoke and fury of October 1973. This was the moment Saudi Arabia stopped being a player in the game and began rewriting the rules. They realized that controlling the oil in the ground was one thing. Controlling its flow to the global market was the ultimate power. The catalyst was the Yom Kippur War. On October 6, 1973, Egyptian and Syrian forces launched a surprise attack on Israel. Within days, the United States, in a massive airlift codenamed Operation Nickelgrass, began funneling billions in advanced weaponry to Israel, turning the tide of the war. For Saudi Arabia's King Faisal, a leader of deep Islamic conviction, who had long warned the U.S. that its unconditional support for Israel would have consequences, this was the final provocation. It was not just a political disagreement, it was a visceral betrayal. The Arab world was humiliated, and America was the enabler. King Faisal and Oil Minister Yamani now activated the weapon they had been forging. On October 16, 1973, OPEC unilaterally raised the posted price of oil by 70%. The next day, October 17th, the Arab members of OPEC, led by Saudi Arabia, announced a total embargo on oil shipments to the United States and other Israeli allies. They would also cut overall production by 5% each month until their political demands were met. This was not merely a protest, it was a calculated economic siege. The effect was instantaneous and apocalyptic for the industrialized West. The price of oil didn't just rise, it quadrupled, from around $3 to nearly $12 a barrel almost overnight. In the United States, the era of cheap, limitless gasoline vanished. Panic buying ensued. Gas stations posted no gas signs. Mile-long queues of cars snaked through cities, leading to fistfights and rationing based on license plate numbers. The federal government imposed a national 55 miles per hour speed limit to conserve fuel. The stock market lost nearly half its value. Energy crisis entered the lexicon, accompanied by a profound sense of vulnerability. For the first time since World War II, the average American felt the direct, painful leverage of a foreign power. The genius of the move was in its cold economics. By cutting production, Saudi Arabia was actually selling less oil, but the stratospheric price increase meant their revenue exploded. Their oil income rocketed from $4.30 billion in 1972 to an astonishing $22.60 billion in 1974. It was the single greatest and fastest transfer of wealth in human history. They had turned a geopolitical statement into a financial windfall of unimaginable scale. The psychological impact was even more profound. The embargo shattered the myth of Western invincibility. A famous, likely apocryphal, exchange captures the shift. U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger reportedly threatened military action against the oil fields. King Faisal's purported reply was a masterclass in defiance. "You are the ones who cannot live without oil. We come from the desert, and our ancestors lived on dates and milk. We can easily go back and live like that again." The message was clear. Your industrial civilization is more addicted to our resource than we are to your goodwill. The West had blinked. Saudi Arabia was no longer a supplicant, it was a rival center of power. The embargo only lasted 5 months, but its lesson was eternal. Oil was not just a commodity, it was a geopolitical stranglehold, and Saudi Arabia had its finger on the windpipe. The unholy alliance, the petrodollar pact, and the price of protection. The 1973 embargo proved Saudi Arabia could crash the global economy, but it also left them terrifyingly exposed. They were now fabulously wealthy, but surrounded by powerful hostile neighbors: Israel, Iran under the Shah, and a radicalized Arab world. Their military was small and inexperienced. They were, in essence, a bank vault, sitting in the middle of a war zone. In Washington, the shock of the embargo bred a singular obsession. This must never happen again. From this mutual fear, Saudi fear of invasion, American fear of economic strangulation, a secret symbiotic pact was born in 1974. It was not a grand public treaty but a series of quiet understandings, negotiated in confidential meetings between U.S. Treasury Secretary William Simon and Saudi officials. The deal would become the invisible architecture of the global financial system for the next half-century. The terms were starkly simple. The U.S. security guarantee. America would provide an implicit but unquestionable military shield over the House of Saud. This meant advanced weapons sales, F-15 fighters, AWACS surveillance planes, training for Saudi forces, and the unspoken promise that any existential threat to the Saudi regime would be met with U.S. force. the kingdom became an unsinkable American aircraft carrier in the Middle East. The Saudi Economic Guarantee. In return, Saudi Arabia would do two world-altering things. First, and most crucially, it would denominate all of its oil sales exclusively in US dollars. This created the petrodollar system. If Japan or Germany wanted to buy Saudi oil, they had to first acquire US dollars on the foreign exchange market. This created a perpetual, structural global demand for the dollar, cementing its status as the world's reserve currency. It was a subsidy of incalculable value to the American economy, granting it the exorbitant privilege of printing the world's money. Second, it would recycle its massive surplus petrodollars, the billions earned from oil, by buying U.S. Treasury bonds. This meant Saudi wealth was loaned back to the U.S. government, financing American deficits and keeping interest rates low. The loop was closed, a perfect circle of dependency. The U.S. bought oil, sending dollars to Saudi. Saudi bought U.S. debt, sending dollars back to America. America used that money to fund the military that protected Saudi Arabia. The kingdom became more than an ally. It became a foundational pillar of American financial hegemony. This explains the enduring, often confounding, U.S. tolerance for Saudi actions. Criticisms of human rights, the war in Yemen, internal repression, all were muffled by the overriding strategic imperative: protect the petrodollar nexus. The relationship was transactional, cynical, and rock solid. Saudi Arabia had traded a measure of its foreign policy autonomy for the ultimate insurance policy. They weren't just rich, they were untouchably rich. The hangover and the gamble. The crash, the Crown Prince, and Vision 2030. For decades, the petrodollar pact delivered paradise. Saudi Arabia built a gilded welfare state from the sand. Citizens paid no income tax. Energy, water, and education were practically free. Government jobs were plentiful and undemanding. The social contract was simple. The Al Saud family provides unimaginable wealth and stability. The people provide political obedience. But this model had a fatal flaw. It assumed the oil money would flow forever at ever higher prices. It was a pyramid scheme built on a single, volatile commodity. The first reckoning came in the mid-1980s. High prices spurred conservation and new production in the North Sea and Alaska. OPEC lost control. Oil prices collapsed from over $35 a barrel to under $10. Saudi Arabia, having expanded its state based on $100 plus oil revenue projections, suddenly faced massive deficits. They burned through foreign reserves. The kingdom, for the first time since the 1930s, had to borrow money internationally. It was a shock to the system, but the true near-death experience arrived in 2014. A perfect storm of booming U.S. shale oil and slowing global demand crashed prices again. Saudi Arabia, along with OPEC, made a strategic blunder. They tried to flood the market to bankrupt the upstart shale drillers. It backfired. Prices plunged below $30. The kingdom was burning, over $100 billion in reserves annually. A leaked government memo presented the unvarnished truth. At this rate, the country would be bankrupt by 2020. The oil curse was no longer an academic concept. It was an existential threat, arriving on a spreadsheet. This crisis birthed the modern era, and its decisive protagonist, Mohammed bin Salman, MBS. Upon his father King Salman's accession in 2015, MBS rapidly consolidated power. He looked at the bloated, inefficient system and saw a relic. His answer was Vision 2030, a plan to surgically dismantle the old petro-state and build a new, diversified economic empire before the oil ran dry. His methods have been a blend of visionary thinking and brutal realpolitik. The internal shakedown 2017, the now infamous Ritz-Carlton purge. Hundreds of princes, ministers, and tycoons were detained in the luxury hotel, accused of corruption. It was a stunning consolidation of power and capital, netting the state an estimated $100 plus billion in settlements. It signaled that no one was above the Crown Prince's reform agenda. Monetizing the crown jewel. In 2019, MBS engineered the IPO of Saudi Aramco, selling 1.5% of the state's secret for a world record $25.60 billion. This capital was funneled into his primary weapon, the Public Investment Fund (PIF). The PIF transformed from a sleepy sovereign fund into the world's most aggressive venture capital firm. Its portfolio is a hedge against the future. $45 billion into Uber, billions more into Lucid Motors, video game giants Activision, EA, and stakes in everything from Disney to Boeing. The strategy is clear. Use today's oil wealth to buy a piece of tomorrow's post-oil economy. Tech, entertainment, tourism, and green energy. The Giga Project Gambit. Then come the domestic moonshots. Neom, a $500 billion futuristic zone on the Red Sea, and its flagship, The Line, a 170-kilometer-long, mirrored linear city meant to house 9 million. There's Trojena, a ski resort in 45 degrees Celsius desert mountains, and Red Sea Global, a luxury tourism project. Critics deride them as dystopian vanity. Supporters see brute force economic diversification. They are designed to create new sectors, jobs, and, crucially, a new global brand. MBS is racing to build a new national identity from scratch. But this ambition has a dark ledger. The social contract is being rewritten. Social freedoms have expanded. Cinemas, concerts, women driving. A political space has vanished. The 2018 murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi cast a long shadow. The war in Yemen drained resources and goodwill. The kingdom remains an absolute monarchy where dissent is not tolerated. Furthermore, this new empire is being built on the backs of millions of migrant laborers whose working conditions, despite reforms, often tell a story far removed from a glossy Neom renderings. The landlords. So, how did Saudi Arabia actually get rich? The answer is not in the sand, but in the strategy. It was a century-long masterclass in leveraged patience. They waited 40 years to own Aramco. They leveraged Cold War fear to get a 50-50 deal. They weaponized their resource to humble the West in 1973. They struck a devil's bargain with America for protection. And now, facing obsolescence, they are leveraging their oil wealth in a desperate, audacious gamble to buy a future beyond it. They understood the fundamental truth that Venezuela and Nigeria did not. A natural resource is not wealth. It is leverage. And true power lies not in having leverage, but in the cold, patient brilliance to wield it, to turn barrels of crude into political influence, military security, and a portfolio that outlives the last well. They are no longer just a gas station. They are the landlords. And in a world still addicted to their product, everyone else is just a tenant. The question for the 21st century is whether their final, most expensive gamble, Vision 2030, will secure their reign for another 100 years, or become the world's most magnificent tombstone for the age of oil.